In the summer of 1994, Toby worked as a delivery driver for a small, struggling pizza parlor called Tony's Crust in a quiet suburb of Ohio. The job was mostly boring, consisting of driving through empty streets and dealing with hungry teenagers. However, the shop had one regular customer who only ordered on rainy Tuesday nights after midnight. The address was always the same: 104 Blackwood Drive, a house located at the very end of a cul-de-sac that backed into a dense, unlit forest. No one liked delivering there, but as the new guy, the shift always fell on Toby. The house at 104 Blackwood Drive was a dilapidated Victorian structure, its white paint peeling like dead skin under the yellow streetlights. Every time Toby arrived, the porch light would flicker, and the front door would already be slightly ajar. He was instructed to leave the pizza on a small wooden stool in the foyer and pick up the cash from a glass jar next to it. He never saw the customer, but he often felt eyes watching him from the darkened staircase that led to the second floor. The air inside the house always smelled of wet earth and old copper. One rainy Tuesday, the order came in as usual: one large pepperoni pizza, no olives. Toby arrived at the house at 12:15 a.m., the rain lashing against his windshield. As he stepped onto the porch, he noticed the stool was missing. Instead, a handwritten note was pinned to the door. "Bring it to the basement. The jar is on the furnace." Toby hesitated, his gut telling him to leave the box and run. But the tip was always $20, and he desperately needed the money for his car repairs. He pushed the heavy door open and entered the cold hallway. The basement door was at the end of the kitchen, and as Toby opened it, a gust of freezing air hit his face. The stairs were narrow and steep, creaking ominously with every step. He reached the bottom and clicked on his flashlight, the beam cutting through a thick layer of dust and cobwebs. The furnace sat in the center of the room like a dormant iron beast. Next to it was the jar, filled with crisp, old $20 bills. He placed the pizza on the furnace, but as he reached for the money, the basement door above him slammed shut with a violent bang. Toby lunged for the stairs, but the light from his flashlight began to flicker and dim. He reached the top and pulled the handle, but the door was locked from the outside. Panic surged through him as he realized there was no window in the basement. He pounded on the wood, screaming for help, but the only response was the rhythmic sound of someone chewing just a few feet behind him. He turned his flashlight back toward the furnace. The pizza box was open, but the pepperoni was gone. In its place was a collection of human fingernails, meticulously arranged in a circle. A low, distorted voice echoed from the shadows behind the furnace. "Still hungry, Toby." The voice sounded like it was coming from a throat filled with gravel. Toby's flashlight finally died, plunging him into absolute darkness. He felt a cold, damp hand brush against his ankle. He scrambled backward, his back hitting the damp stone wall. He heard the sound of the pizza box being folded and the jar being moved. The entity wasn't just a customer, it was a collector of moments, and Toby had just become the newest addition to its dark, subterranean gallery. Suddenly, the basement lights flared to life, bright, blinding fluorescent tubes that Toby hadn't noticed before. Standing by the furnace was a figure wearing the exact same Tony's Crust uniform as Toby. However, the man's face was a smooth, featureless expanse of pale skin, missing eyes, a nose, and a mouth. The entity slowly reached into its pocket and pulled out a delivery slip. It was Toby's own handwriting from the order he had just delivered. The customer had been mimicking him, learning his movements and his life through every delivery he had made over the past month. The featureless man began to vibrate, a low-frequency hum that made Toby's ears bleed. As the vibration intensified, a jagged horizontal slit tore open across the entity's face, revealing rows of needle-thin teeth. "The tip is you," it hissed. Toby grabbed a heavy iron poker from near the furnace and swung it with all his might. The weapon passed through the figure as if it were made of smoke, clattering against the concrete floor. The entity lunged, its long, spindly fingers wrapping around Toby's throat. The world began to fade into a blur of gray static and cold air. Toby woke up in the driver's seat of his car, the engine idling and the radio playing a soft 90s ballad. He was parked in front of the pizza shop. He checked his watch. It was 12:05 a.m. The delivery bag sat in the passenger seat, still warm. He checked his reflection in the rearview mirror and gasped. His eyes were gone, replaced by two solid, light-absorbing black voids. He tried to speak, but his voice was a multi-layered, distorted mess. He realized with horror that the customer hadn't killed him. It had swapped places with him. The shop door opened, and Tony, the owner, poked his head out. "Toby, what are you doing? We just got another order for 104 Blackwood Drive. Get moving." Toby tried to resist, but his body moved on its own, his hands gripping the steering wheel with mechanical precision. He drove back to the house, the rain still pouring down. He arrived at the cul-de-sac and saw a figure standing on the porch. It was himself, the real Toby, standing there with a look of pure terror, holding a pizza box. The loop had begun, and Toby was now the entity waiting in the dark. Every Tuesday night for years, Toby, or the thing that wore his skin, would deliver a pizza to the basement of 104 Blackwood Drive. Each time, he would find a new version of himself waiting there, a fresh soul to be consumed and replaced. The basement was filled with the discarded remains of his past lives. Piles of uniforms, delivery bags, and thousands of fingernails. The customer was a parasitic cycle that required a constant flow of fresh identity to maintain its existence in the physical world. Toby was just a cog in a very hungry machine. One night, a new driver arrived, a young girl named Sarah. Toby, now fully transformed into the featureless entity, watched her from the shadows of the basement. He felt a flicker of his old humanity, a desperate urge to warn her to run. But the hunger was too strong. As she reached for the jar of money, Toby's jagged mouth opened, and he whispered her name. The sound of her scream was the only music he had heard in decades. The transition was quick, and soon, Sarah was the one sitting in the car, her eyes turning into black voids. The house at 104 Blackwood Drive was eventually torn down to make way for a new housing development. But the cycle didn't stop. The entity simply moved its delivery point to a different house, a different town, and a different decade. Now it uses delivery apps, tracking its victims through GPS and digital receipts. The orders are still the same: pepperoni, no olives. But the price is much higher than $20. It seeks those who are isolated, those who work the late shifts, and those who don't question why a door is left slightly ajar. To this day, late-night drivers often report seeing a Tony's Crust car parked in empty parking lots, its driver sitting motionless with solid black eyes. Some say they hear a distorted voice over their radio, whispering delivery instructions for addresses that don't exist on any map. If you are a delivery driver and you receive an order for a house at the end of a dark road, check the notes. If it asks you to bring the food to the basement, cancel the order and drive as far away as you possibly can. The customer is always waiting, and he is very, very patient. He doesn't just want the pizza. He wants the hands that carry it, the eyes that find the house, and the voice that says, "That'll be $15. He is a shadow in the analog era that has successfully migrated into the digital age, a glitch in the system that feeds on our routine. So, the next time your doorbell rings after midnight and you didn't order anything, think twice before opening the door. It might just be Toby, looking to finish his final delivery.